So, hello everyone. Okay, this is the first in the literature enrichment courses that I'm going to create. I've created them with my Year 10 class in mind to keep their hopefully love of literature ticking over, but I've also created it with any Year 11s in mind who are considering taking literature for A level. So I'm posting it in both classes, and I'm also sharing it with the English team. So you may well have this, and I was never your English teacher, so get it. The bell that you might hear during this recording will be my cat, of course, Polly, who's chasing flies around the room. So she's behind me at the moment at the French doors searching for flies. She should go out, she just doesn't want to. So we're going to look at a short story called The Yellow Wallpaper by an American writer called Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I love this story. I was first introduced to it in university, and I think it's a really, really good introduction to Victorian literature and a good transition into Jane Eyre, which is the prose text that you would study at A level in Year 12. There in the Google Classroom assignment are this PowerPoint, so I put the whole PowerPoint there. I'll upload these Loom videos as I record them. I'll be doing a session one at a time. There is a copy of the text. It's a short story, as I said, so it's just a PDF document of that. There is a link to Audible where you can get a free audiobook version of the text, so you can listen to it, whilst you read along. And I've put a link to a really short lecture on YouTube from a doctor of literature who talks about it. Excuse me, I should have a little drink. So we're going to look at the yellow wallpaper. Now, it would be an idea for you to have a pen and paper because there are opportunities here for you to make some notes. If you've got a notebook, that'd be great, and you can keep these then for when you come to either study A level or when we are reunited, Year 10. So without further ado, we'll get started. So the first session is, we're not even going to read the story in the first session, we're just going to think about some key English skills, and I'm going to introduce you to some critical theory as well. So here we go. So session one, as I said, is just the introduction to the story and looking at a key literary theory, which I'll explain later. So first of all, I would like you to consider the difference between inference and deduction. You may know, you may not know. It doesn't matter. I will clarify shortly. If at any point as well you need time to think, obviously, then just pause the video and think, and I will direct you to do that at times too. So pause the video now, have a little think about inference versus deduction. Pause. Welcome back, everybody. Seems so silly. Welcome back, everyone. So to clarify then, to infer is to make guesses based on clues, and you don't always have to be right, and I'll give you an example now. And to deduce is to come to the right answer based on the clues, like Sherlock Holmes does, when he does his beep, 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 and he looks at all the clues and comes to the correct answer. Now, inference is more important, I say, in English, and it's that what you need to get over is that fear that you don't have to be right all the time. It can be a guess, and it should be. And in A level, one of the assessment objectives is to look at other interpretations. One aspect of that is looking at critical literary theory, which is what we'll go on to later in this session. But the simple side of that is just looking at alternative interpretations of the clues that you're given in a text. And that is inference. And that's a high-level skill. And to deduce is something that you would do naturally as a reader without even knowing that you do it. So we'll have a little look. So inference. The first thing I want you to do is to infer. Okay, so think about the title of the story, The Yellow Wallpaper. What do you think the story will be about and why? So have a pause, have a guess, and that's what inference is. Go, pause. Welcome back. You could infer loads of things. What does the colour yellow suggest to you? Happiness, perhaps. Often yellow obviously is a sunny colour. Wallpaper could be set in a home. Could be about decorating. Who knows? You're guessing. You shouldn't have to know yet. And then deduction. Sorry. So what can you deduce about the narrator from the first line of the story? So what can you work out and come to an educated guess about the narrator? So it's probably going to be right. So the first line is, it is very seldom that mere ordinary people like John and myself secure ancestral homes for the summer. So I've just said what ancestral halls. I've just said there what that means. So have a go now at thinking, what can you deduce about the narrator? Pause. Welcome back. Some deductions you may have made: that she's married. I told you earlier, well, it was on the first slide actually, and I said it was Victorian literature, but it was published and written about 1890, 1891. So the fact she says John and myself, she must be married. She wouldn't be living with a man if she weren't married. So she's a married woman as well, because there wouldn't have been any same-sex relationships, or certainly not out in the open. In a Victorian period, it was illegal. Her husband's name is John. She isn't used to staying in big houses because she says it's very seldom. That means it's rare. She's probably middle class. That's a more difficult one. You'd have to know a bit more about the context. But when she says that mere ordinary people, she wouldn't be working class because they wouldn't have access to an old house belonging to some family member somewhere down the line. So she's probably middle class. So there's inference and deduction, just as an English skill to get you warmed up. So we're going to have a little look at Charlotte Perkins Gilman's background first. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to translate each of these paragraphs into your own words. Sum up what is being said about Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So you will need to pause this, and it'll need to pause for a long time. That's fine. I won't still be here waiting in my living room to go through and see if you can basically summarize what each paragraph, Polly's eating a fly, what each paragraph tells us about CPG. So pause now. Welcome back. So Charlotte Perkins Gilman was best known in her time as a crusading journalist and feminist intellectual. I've translated that to Charlotte Perkins Gilman was a feminist journalist with a mission. The second paragraph, she was concerned with how unfair society and politics were, but she mainly focused on how women were treated unfairly in marriages because of the idea of marriage. She argued that because women were expected to be housewives, they were unable to be creative or stretch their intelligence. She thought that this was unfair for women and for the whole of society, as women could be more useful if they were allowed to have proper jobs. And then finally, she argued that the traditional expectations of men and women made everyone unhappy, as women didn't want to be servants, not all men wanted to rule over their family, and children would have unhappy parents. So you can see from this that it said in the original, she was a crusading journalist. She had a mission. She wanted to hold a mirror up to society and make people question society's expectations of women in particular. And you will find that in literature, that is often the author's intentions. If we think about Of Mice and Men, what was John Steinbeck trying to show us? Holding a mirror up to society and getting society to look at itself. And that's quite, Of Mice and Men is quite a difficult one to think about that, because actually what he was doing was holding up a mirror to his contemporary society in the 1930s. If we think about an Inspector Calls, that held up a mirror to society in the 1940s. Look at what we've been like, but also it still holds true as a mirror to society nowadays, and we can learn lessons from the play. I would argue that Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper is quite specific to that time, and we will discover why as we go through these sessions. There are 6 sessions in all, but there are still lessons that we can learn as a modern society from what she shows us, and what she asks us to look at in ourselves as she holds that mirror up to society. So as you move on to your AS study, that is something really that you need to be thinking about. What is the author intending for their readers to see in the mirror as they look at the mirror being the book, or the text that they've produced. So she argued that marriage was unfair, not just for women actually, but for everybody involved in marriage, because it was restrictive, and the expectations of women in marriage meant that they were expected to be domestic, and stay in that domestic sphere, of being a housewife, and not exercise any creativity or stretch their intellect, and that was unhealthy. Excuse me, just gonna have a drink. The cat's up. Okay, this is the major shift now from year 10, 11 study to year 12 study. This idea of critical literary theory. So when reading literature, you'll read it through your own eyes. Okay, so you will read The Yellow Wallpaper as 14, 15, 16-year-old girls and boys in 2020. I read this as a probably 19, 20-year-old woman in the early 2000s. That was difficult to admit. Did I? Was that? Yeah, early 2000s, yes. Anyway, and we would have different reactions based on our own experiences of life. At A level, that is acceptable. However, you will be asked to, and I use this as a metaphor, put on literary theory glasses, and read through different lenses. So we're going to look in this course on The Yellow Wallpaper at feminism and feminist literary theory. So I will be asking you to put your feminist glasses on and look at it from that point of view. But before we even get there, we need to learn about the basics of feminist literary theory. So, if you're reading through a feminist lens, you should pay attention to the following. You should be asking these questions. How are female characters presented compared to male characters? So how are they presented and how do they compare? How do you react to what you read based on your gender? Because, and I remember with my year 10 class, obviously, I know you guys, some of the boys and the girls had different reactions to parts of heroes based on gender, quite often. If gender is restrictive, you are a man, you are a woman, how are female characters restricted by their gender in the texts? How are society's expectations of women presented in the text? How do male and female writers present gender? Because that's different as well. We always need to think, who's writing this and what's their gender? It was interesting. This is a complete aside, but that it might illustrate here the point that I'm trying to make. Is Stephen Fry is a famous British actor and intellectual, and on Instagram every morning he posts a picture of a tie of his, and he's very posh, and obviously quite wealthy. And this morning he posted a tie by Christian Dior. Now Christian Dior was a designer, fashion designer, a male fashion designer in the 1940s who sort of broke fashion, because after the war, when there was hardly any materials, rationing, he started designing these very voluptuous dresses for women, with using lots and lots of material, with a cinched in waspy waist like this. The women, the look was they would go like that, the women, okay, and like a short 1940s 50s mid-calf dress. And Coco Chanel, who was a famous French designer woman at the time, said, I can't remember the actual quote she said, but something like, he's, a man, how would he know what a woman wants to wear? And it got me thinking, because Stephen Fry had mentioned actually that a lot of fashion designers for women are men. And is there something there that men continue to influence what women wear? And that's just something to think about. And it's this idea, isn't it? When men write about women, how does their gender influence how they present women? It's funny, isn't it? It's just something. And it's not me being a feminist here, although it is a long-standing literary theory. And gender studies is something that you can do at university. I went to Swansea University, and there's a really strong, and there certainly was when I was in uni, a really strong gender studies department there. And you'd look at gender studies in literature, in art, in politics, or lots of different things. It's a really interesting course if anybody finds this aspect of English interesting. So a slight aside there, but something I think that demonstrates what I'm trying to say, that male and female writers will present gender differently. And actually, I don't always like reading books about female protagonists written by men. I don't know. I just think, how much do you really understand? I don't know. And I wonder if men feel the same. Do they think, well, actually, that doesn't sound right. That male character doesn't sound right because it's written by a woman and she would never truly understand. And so it works both ways. Anyway, Simone de Beauvoir, she was a feminist critic back in the 20th century, and she sort of stated these things. Society expects each gender to behave in a distinct way. So we are conditioned to behave in a way because of what society expects us to be like. Women are oppressed, pushed down, as they are only valued for their looks and their societal function as wives and mothers. Women are the second sex, and that's a term that was coined by Beauvoir, as they are seen as less powerful and important to men. And these are sort of ideas that we can start thinking about when we start next session reading the Yellow Wallpaper. Excuse me. So I'm going to hurry this up. I've got a meeting soon. So these are some things just to bear in mind. Now, you may wish to pause the video now to be able to make a note of some of these things in your notebook, because feminist literary theory is something that will come into play when you study Jane Eyre, definitely. So it really is something that you need to consider. So maybe pause now. Okay, so we've got some key vocabulary here when it comes to feminism or feminist literary theory. So I just wonder, and again, you'll have to pause this to be able to do it. Can you match the word on the left-hand side down here to the definitions on the right-hand side? So pause, have a go at those. Hello, welcome back. So let's just go through the answers to these. So reinforce is to strengthen or support. Stereotypical is relating to a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. That's a really long explanation and definition. It's a dictionary definition. I think lots of people understand the notion of stereotyping. Submissive, if you are submissive, you are ready to conform to the authority or the will of others. Sub meaning under. Dominant, most powerful. You'll know that from biology, probably, the dominant genes and that sort of thing. To subvert is to undermine the power and authority of something, usually an established system or institution. So you could subvert society's expectations and make women the most powerful characters. And if you're interested in books like that, The Power by, what's her name? Naomi something? I think The Power. That is a book that you might be interested in, a fiction novel. And actually, that could be something that you used in your Year 13 coursework in the future. Other students in the past have used it, so it might be one worth reading. And then patriarchal is controlled by men. Pater in Latin meaning father, and mater meaning mother, so maternal and paternal. Okay, so those are our key vocabulary. And we're going to move on now just to practice using our feminist literary lenses to read a text. Now, I used to, when I was young and enthusiastic, make my students put on fake glasses, and and I have got glasses somewhere actually, but I'm not going to put them on because I look ridiculous. And I tried to video this, and I don't know whether I have or I haven't. So I don't know. By the end of this, I may have videoed this. I'm not sure. Okay, so we're going to look at Where the Wild Things Are, which is a picture book from the 1960s. Okay, so you need to bear that in mind as well. So put your feminist glasses on and read this text, asking yourself those feminist literary theory questions. Okay, so the ones that we had on a previous slide. So how are male and female characters presented? It's a male writer. How is he presenting female characters? Those sorts of things, and see if you can write down just a few observations, a few bullet points, and see if the challenge here is to use some of those words from the previous slide to express your ideas. So here we go. Shall I read it out? Yeah, it'll give me something to do. Where the Wild Things Are. The knight. Oh, have I done? The knight wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind or another, and his arm. It should say the knight Max. Sorry, that's my fault, my typing. I've typed it out. The knight Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. That very night, in Max's room, a forest grew and grew and grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around, and an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max. And he sailed off through the night and day and in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all and made him king of all the wild things. "And now," cried Max, "let the wild rumpus start." "Now stop." There's a picture, usually in the picture book, where they're all going wild and having a great time. "Now stop," Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all the wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around from far away across the world, he smelled good things to eat, so he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go, we'll eat you up, we love you so." And Max said, "No." The wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye and sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him, and it was still hot. Ah, cute childhood picture book and story. Or is it just reinforcing society's expectations? So How are female characters presented compared to the male characters? There's only a mother, no father. Where is he? Is he in work? Does the mother work, or is she only a mother? To link to de Beauvoir's assertion that women are wives and mothers only. Max is a male and he dominates once he reaches the wild things. Would that have happened if he were a female? These are things that we'd be thinking about with our feminist glasses on. How do you react to what you've read based on your gender? So obviously I can't answer that for you, but I'm a woman. So as a woman, it makes me angry as it's a children's book, reinforcing stereotypical gender roles of male dominance and female submissiveness. Gender is restrictive. So how are the characters restricted by their gender? Again, is she just a mother? She's cooking. That's what you do. And she's not the one who escapes and goes to where the wild things are. She is kept in the home. How are society's expectations of women presented in the text? Female, she's the servant. Male, he's the ruler. How do male and female writers present gender? Well, it's a male writer and he's in the 1960s. We must take that into account when there was a feminist movement actually in the 1960s, and where women started to, again, I think it was second wave feminism. It has a name to it if you want to do some more research. So second wave feminism in the 1960s, where women started to feel their power, really. It's when contraception, like the pill, was first invented and introduced. So it gave women control over their bodies in that way. And lots of things, happened. So did Maurice Sendak write this with that in mind, trying to remind us about where women should be? Are we reading too much into it? It's just a children's story. But this is what we do as students of literature. And particularly if you take A-level, you will never be able to stop analysing things that you read or films that you watch or adverts that you see on TV. And that's the link there with media studies as well. It really is a curse. I'm just going to take it back a moment because I noticed something. It's here, this here, where Max tells them after the rumpus, now stop, Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And it's something I hadn't written on the slide, but when I read it through to you just then, his mother is obviously very influential over him as well, because he is imitating her, because he was sent to bed without eating anything, for being a wild thing. And he was making mischief earlier in the story. So that shows the influence of mothers over their children, even little boys. And we can read that as you like. Is that a positive presentation of women or this female character then? It's just something I thought of there. So thinking about feminist literary theory, next session we will go on to read The Yellow Wallpaper. My challenge to you is to get your feminist literary lenses on, and see if you watch a couple of adverts, check out I don't know if people watch normal TV anymore. I don't, so I don't like watch a TV program with adverts in, really, excuse me. But if it's a female TV show or female orientated TV show, how are the adverts geared towards their target audience, and how are they presenting women and men? It's interesting. So get your feminist glasses on in between this session and the next, and see what you notice, because it might blow your minds a little bit. So hopefully that was useful. We've got 6 sessions, so I will record the next video. Obviously, you don't have to do them. You don't have to break in between them. If you can stand my voice for any longer, then you can you can do them all in one go. And like I said, this PowerPoint will be on the Google Classroom assignment as well, so you have access to it, and I will correct the mistakes I've just spotted and proofread the rest of it. Okay, so I hope you're well. Take care, and we shall end that now. Bye.